All
All
right.
right.
Oh, I got a little echo there. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So happy to see so many familiar faces and new faces with us today. So let's go ahead and get started. And make sure, there we go. All right. Welcome teachers, board members, and friends of ACE to this Champions in Education virtual keynote with Dr. Siri Terjesen titled Sports, Entrepreneurship, and Economics. My name is Teresa Mungai, and I am the Director of Programs for the Arizona Council on Economic Education. Thank you for joining us for a very special conversation during a very special month, the first ever National Economics Education Month. So let's give a round of applause for that happening. To that end, I would like to share with all of you passionate advocates of economic education, a proclamation from Governor Ducey to start this event. And let me find that proclamation so that I can share it with you. And if everybody on that note could mute if they are not speaking. All right, here we go. So we are very honored in Arizona to have Governor Ducey sign the proclamation making an Economic Education Month here in Arizona. So I would like to share that with you. So it says, the State of Arizona Proclamation, whereas economics is the study of making sound decisions and managing scarce resources, which is essential skill for all people. And whereas the aim of economic education is to equip students with skills and tools for their economic roles as productive workers, informed consumers and savers, involved citizens, and lifelong decision makers in a globally interdependent world. And whereas our democracy depends on our active support and involvement of economically literate citizens who can understand, evaluate public policy. And whereas economic education is encouraged to be taught in our Arizona schools, where even young children are capable of learning basic economic concepts that help them understand their economic world. And whereas economic education in our schools depends on educators equipped with high quality training and resources to ensure students have equitable access to classroom lessons that develop the skills necessary to make informed choices as citizens. Now, therefore, Governor Doug Ducey do hereby proclaim October 2021 Economic Education Month. So we're so excited about that. Next, and let me make sure she is back. If we could get a round of applause, we want to see some excitement. You can either use your virtual clapping hands or actually clap. We're all good with that too. And I think that Jen is back. So next, Jen Mozillo, ACE Director of Operations, will announce and introduce the 2021 Economic Education Teachers of the Year.
Thank you, Teresa. As Teresa just said, I have the great honor of introducing the 2021 Economic Education Teachers of the Year. So please join me in welcoming Carolee Sopicki of St. Anthony of Padua Catholic School in Casa Grande, Arizona, and Danielle Bonfig from Flagstaff High School in Flagstaff, Arizona. Both of these recipients were chosen for their professional development, participation, sharing with their peers, and student engagement. Carolee is a quiet and very humble leader. Her peers will talk about her genuine love of learning and teaching, while her students feel like they can accomplish anything because of the confidence she gives them. Danielle, on the other hand, is energetic and creates an environment of community in her classroom. Danielle's students and her peers talk about how she is always present and available to help with anything. Both of these teachers make those around them want to do better and to strive to be the best that they can be. We are so excited to be honoring these two teachers at the Champions in Education event on 11/2, so 2 weeks from yesterday at Scottsdale Resort at McCormick Ranch. So we hope that you'll stay connected until the end for a chance to win tickets to attend this event in person, and for those of you outside of Maricopa County, virtually. So with that, if we could all just maybe unmute for a minute and maybe a round of applause for Carolee and Danielle.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you.
So now I would like to turn it over to Kate Johnson, one of our amazing ACEE Board of Directors.
Thanks, Jen. I am delighted to introduce Dr. Siri Terjesen, an internationally recognized scholar and entrepreneur. She's known for her central contributions in the academic fields of entrepreneurship, strategy, and corporate governance. Her work has been cited by her peers over 12,000 times. And last I checked, she's raised over $5 million just for research. So Dr. Terjesen is no stranger to public service. She currently hangs her hat at Florida Atlantic University and serves as the Associate Dean of Research and External Relations, and she holds the Phil Smith Professorship in Entrepreneurship. She serves as a reviewer for the Swedish and Norwegian government's higher education programs. She's an advisor to the World Bank, the Kauffman Foundation, and a variety of think tanks and universities in Europe and the United States. What brings her to us? She came to our attention because of her numerous national and university-wide teaching awards. She's passionate about mentorship as well as teaching. In fact, she mentors 15 students each year through the UNCF Koch Scholars Program. The UNCF funds African-American students at historically Black colleges and universities. So when we approached her last year and asked her to give this talk to our treasured teachers and supporters, she said, yes, 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 without hesitation, followed by her, I love high school economics teachers, which translates into, I have met high school economics teachers because to know you all is to love you. She knows what you do each day to make the world better. The last bit I'm going to say just to round out this already full introduction, Siri was also a competitive marathon and ultra distance runner, representing the United States, England, and Queensland in international competitions, depending on where her academic post took her. This includes an individual bronze in the world 50K. I'm just going to pause for a moment. And winning over 40 marathons around the world. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Siri Terjesen for her talk on sports, entrepreneurship, and economics.
Oh, thank you, Kate. Thank you, Elena, Jen, Teresa, Kathy, all of you. It is so much fun to meet you, and a special congratulations to Carolee and Danielle for those awards. My daughter's teacher here in Florida is one of our national or our state winners for a different competition. It's just such a source of pride. And I know how hard all of you have delivered, and now you're joining us in the evening. Whenever I go to a conference and there are high school teachers of economics, I absolutely gravitate to you guys because as Kate said, I just absolutely admire what you're doing, and I'm flattered to be here with you tonight. I actually had my high school yearbook out today to try to find a picture of those economics classes, but turns out that they aren't in the yearbook, but they're imprinted in my mind. And actually still Facebook friends with my high school economics teacher at Engler, and I reached out to him about this and thanked him, as I want to thank all of you tonight, and then also in person at your gala on November 2nd. So tonight, you guys asked me to address sports, entrepreneurship, and economics. So I'll try to do so in that order. And I've got just a few slides, but I promise no death by PowerPoint here. Here we go. Can you see those okay? All right. Well, I'm truly honored to be here with you. I really admire the Arizona K-12 system, especially. I've actually studied that for a couple of years, and for all of you, you know opportunity costs better than most folks, and the idea that you've all devoted your lives to helping the students in Arizona lead more fulfilling lives is amazing and so inspiring for me, and I'm so grateful. So I wanted to kick off tonight by talking about sports, since you made that first in my title. And this is the first time I've ever done that, but I was thinking about inspiration for this talk. And I went to my garage, and you'll see this on the next slide, but I got out my brace because I think you discovered my bios online, but you didn't see some of the other information about me online. And that is that when I was the age of the students in your classes, 7 to 16, I wore this brace and actually two others here 23 hours a day, 7 days a week, until I had a scoliosis surgery at age 16. That was 2 steel rods, almost the length of my spine. I'll show you those braces because they really, maybe some of you know, there are actually 3 million Americans who have some form of scoliosis, and some of us had really severe like this. I never shared this before. It's the first time anyone outside my family has seen these braces, but I'm showing you this because I think so many of you can see where your students are, even better than the students and their families can see themselves, and you bring them to another level. And I'm thankful that a lot of people could help me with that. So I was allowed to take this brace off for an hour a day, and I would run to my friends' houses when I was a little girl and play with them and then run home. And then later I could do track and cross country, but again, only 1 hour a day. And then at 16, I learned that my curvature was too severe and that these braces had never fixed the curvature in my spine. And so I would need this surgery. And that involved being in a wheelchair for a few weeks while I was in high school, and then not being allowed to run or jump for 6 months. And then it was many, many, many years before I would get to running again. And if any of you have been in such a situation in your life, it's always good to look at role models. Mine were the 2 ladies pictured here. Louise Savage, this Australian Paralympian, who already in the 1992 Barcelona Games, she was just a couple of years older than me. She had won 3 golds and a silver medal in the 100 meter to 800 meter. And I knew she had had scoliosis, and she'd actually had 21 surgeries. I only had 1. And she continues to dominate, even won 4 Boston marathons. And then the lady on the right is Jeanette Lee, who is a famous American and actually was the #1 woman in billiards in the 90s as well. So same time that I was looking for inspiration, because no one in my community had had scoliosis. And Jeanette later became basically the world's top female billiards player and just a force to be reckoned with. So as you recall from those days, we didn't have the internet. We couldn't bookmark those pages. I instead had a news clipping of each of these ladies, and I saved it and looked to them for inspiration. So it wasn't until I was in college when I started to run again, because any of you who haven't not run or done exercise for a while, you know, it's a bit of a bit to get back into things. And I live in a little bit the country of Ohio, so I would run in the suburbs from one mailbox to the next. And then once I hit that next mailbox, I'd allow myself to walk. And maybe the next day I'd go a little bit further. And I learned 2 things in these, which helped me back then for running and also helps me now to focus. And I didn't know it at the time. I think my cross country coach told me, well, put your middle finger and your thumb together, and that'll help you when you're running. And then another thing was that I figured out myself was just to think positive thoughts, that whatever activity we're engaged in, but I've noticed it with running, that if we think negative thoughts, we can't work through as efficiently. I would slow down my running. And so I always thought about positive things, including my high school economics classes and my very first introduction to the stock market and to supply and demand curves. But eventually I did get to start running some miles at the University of Richmond, where I went to school. And then when I went to Norway to do my master's in economics as a Fulbright to the Norwegian School of Economics, we had this very big competition from Bergen to Oslo. So it was across Norway, but one of the shorter distances across Norway, not lengthwise. And it was our business school versus another business school. And we had to be able to run against them. So I trained a little bit more then, and it was great in the hills. You can see my business schools right on the ocean, but right at the edge of the mountains as well. And then when I got to do my PhD in the UK, I kept running just for fun. And then I started to realize that I was running such long distances that I might as well get into marathoning. And while I was doing my PhD, I was basically only doing my PhD and running. So on the weekends, I would take a train someplace, work the whole time on the train, fall asleep reading and writing papers, and then wake up and run and celebrate with some folks, and then head back on the train again. And that was a truly beautiful life. And I think that was a chance where I got to achieve flow. And maybe a lot of you feel flow when you're teaching too, and you just really focus on doing something that you absolutely love. But one day I was at the London Marathon Expo volunteering, and my friend Pam came up to me and said, you know, I think you ought to run the 50K championships, the England National Championships. And I thought, well, that sounded like a good idea. That's 31 miles. It's a little bit longer than a marathon. And I signed up, and at the starting line of that race, I met one of my best friends, Isabel Partridge, and we ran the whole race together, a little over 3 hours, talked the entire time, and we just got to know each other. And the final 200 meters of that race, and actually that's that picture on the right, was towards the end there. Either of us could have won that race, and we just held hands and crossed the finish line together. And for me, that was really important, and actually an example in economics where we think about sometimes separating the pie, but there's so many opportunities to grow the pie. And for both of us, we got a really good friend, a running buddy, really friends for life and inspiration. And that was an important lesson and an important support for me in what was to become later an even more competitive sport. And of course, there were more things. Kate was kind of mentioned. I did run in the World Championships a few times. I was very proud to represent the United States at the World Championships for the 100K and also for the 50K. I got to run over 100 marathons around the world. And now for Isabel and I, those are her daughters in the bottom right. Those are 2 of my 3 kids on the top left. But it's really about the next generation and coaching and cheering on kids. That's so beautiful. And I'm sharing this story with you because, you know, we all can do something from what sometimes seems like nothing, right? Like running from one mailbox to another and then having to stop. And each time we lean in and we persevere, we learn those skills and we can apply them for the future. And for me, those role models were Louise Savage and Jeanette Lee, but there were so many wonderful mentors along the way. And I think about that when I think about my high school teachers. I think that some I was fortunate enough to be mentored by because I took their classes. And for others, I still consider them role models. And I suspect that many of you are experiencing them as well, that you have students who you get to work with every day in classes or in other programs, but you probably are conscious that there are many other students who are watching you and learning from you and are inspired by you and are role models that know you, but maybe you don't know them, versus mentors who you can work with. And again, that you see the gaps in those students and you can really fill them. So I think the best thing that ever happened to me in high school was that my teacher, Ed Engler, introduced us to stock markets, supply and demand curves, and just this whole world of economics that I wasn't aware of. Up until then, my favorite thing was history. And since then, I've really devoted my life to helping students in the next piece, the higher education piece, to get to the highest level of human flourishing, to be able to reach their goals, to understand and appreciate the value of economic freedom and free enterprise, and to make really good decisions. And I think that so many of you have done that and laid the groundwork, especially because not everyone goes to college, and you are it for their lives, for financial literacy. And I imagine that a lot of you have stories of your students who've gone on to run successful businesses, go up the ladder in existing organizations. And you're also busy teaching 200,000 students. That's how much AC touches, that I don't know that you have a lot of time to think about the research and to look at some of the research findings. So for the remainder of my talk, I wanted to highlight for you some of the really neat findings around the world about these economic relationships, and to talk about how the personal finance and the economics and the entrepreneurship education can really transform lives. And we've been fortunate because we've had so many longitudinal studies where we can look at the effects. So it's not just singular case studies of demonstrating that, but really looking at that. And I wanted to share those with you tonight. My favorite paper is in a journal called GIBO, And this looks at all people in Sweden, because a long time ago in Sweden, there was a policy where some school districts and areas could have economic education in what they called junior achievement, and others didn't. So there was this perfect natural experiment to look at this, which is better than just surveying students who went through a course a few weeks later. And so they got all the students across Sweden who finished these programs between 1994 and 1996. And then they followed them for 16 years, up until these people were in their 30s and 40s. And they compared them to a matched sample of students who had similar characteristics. And they controlled for everything that we know that predicts entrepreneurship. That's gender, parents' income, parents' level of education, whether or not your parents are first or second generation immigrants, whether or not your parent, one or both of your parents is a business owner, your parents' university degrees, your high school grades, your overall levels of education after high school, and your marital status and unemployment status. And they found that people who had economics education, that significantly increased the probability of them starting a firm, as well as earning greater income from those entrepreneurial activities. So although there have been many, many studies, I think this is the most where you can say, wow, that's impactful. Then we can look at the US, and there are so many studies of economic literacy. And I've gone through a lot of them. This is one of my favorites because it's a very robust study. And here they looked at US states like yours that have had policies to include financial literacy and education. And then they looked at two different states, Georgia and Texas, that had very contrasting policies. And what they found, and they were looking at just after high school, ages 18 to 21, which is, as you know, is when you become most economically self-sufficient. And you really face these real economic decisions. And I just want to highlight that these decisions, that's the slide on the right, are far more significant than what some of us faced 20 years ago. If you can see on the far right, the very first big economic decision that students face at about 17 or 18 is whether or not to go to college and where. And college has become, tuition and fees have become about 160% more expensive over the last 20 years. It's the second, as you can see, most expensive in a basket of goods. By contrast, your TVs are about 100% cheaper. So this is a really big decision. And there are a lot of decisions, and these researchers looked at this. And what they found is that the students who had financial literacy in the courses that you are teaching, they had fewer credit defaults, they had much higher credit scores. Other research finds that they tend to make better decisions. So we can find a lot of support, not just to declare this month as Economic Education Month, but also for the important work that you're doing. Then I want to talk about some other decisions that we face. I think that life can be seen as a series of decisions, and they're really path dependent. And when you get good information, when you get good mentors, when you get good role models, you can make better decisions. And as some of you know, your students don't have necessarily great role modeling of these decisions at home. You are clearly the teacher for them, and sometimes the only teacher, and it's so important. So I want to conclude this talk by talking a little bit about entrepreneurship, because study after study, including that Swedish study, shows that greater education about economics, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy at the earliest stages can result in so much better life outcomes. And we know that entrepreneurs are, as a population, among some of the happiest people on the planet, and they also take the best care of their parents in old age. You can mention that to your teachers. But we also know that they can create some of the greatest change in their communities and in their countries, as Kofi Annan said. I love entrepreneurship because there's something good for everyone. All over the world, you've got new business ideas coming from Arizona and going out from Arizona. You've got governments that are taking advantage of these great technologies. Entrepreneurs are solving government failures. And then for individuals, there's all kinds of employment opportunities and solutions for lives. So let's talk just a little bit about entrepreneurship. I've been part of the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor for about 15 years. And this is an annual study of entrepreneurial activity all over the globe. We typically have at least 60 countries, and we ask 2,000 individuals in each country at a minimum. And we random sample those and weight them back to the population. So the data's been pretty good, and we can see the prevalence rates because if you look at entrepreneurship around the world, there is no other indicator because the requirements for what it takes to start a business are so different everywhere around the world that we really need a survey like this, which is done by telephone or sometimes walking from home to home. So what we can see from this slide over there on the right-hand side is that on average, about 11% of the adult population reports that they're currently trying to start a business or they're running a business that's under 42 months old. And we've separated this on the x-axis here to show you different types of economies. So on the far left, you've got economies that are factor-driven, which tend to have low GDP per capita. Then you have some developing economies and transitioning. And then you have the developed, what we would call innovation-driven economies that have a lot of ICT. And you can see that in the US, there's fairly high rates of entrepreneurial activity, especially compared to other innovation-driven economies. And many of you are familiar with this, but of course, some of those higher rates of entrepreneurial activity in the more developing countries is mostly due to necessity-based entrepreneurship, that those individuals are reporting that they're starting a business or running a business because there aren't any other choices. But now I want to get to a topic where some of you had questions before the talk, which is social entrepreneurship. Because in 2009 and 2015, I ran the team that also surveyed social entrepreneurship. I was noticing this in my university classes. And when I met high school teachers at conferences, they were telling me that a lot of their students were trying to start social ventures. So here we're comparing different regions of the world, and we've grouped Australia and the US together because they're quite similar. When you group those two countries together, you have about 7% of the population that's currently starting or running a young business that's traditional. And then you have about 4% that's actually starting or running a social venture. And by that, we mean any sort of business that solves some sort of social or environmental challenge. That could be hunger and homelessness, pollution, social isolation. And these businesses typically employ business models on sort of neglected markets. And there's so many ways to split the data, but this is a huge phenomenon. What you see in that green bar is that there's actually 2% of the, or one, well, depending on the country, 1 to 2%, in the US, and Australia, 1.2%, that's also starting both a traditional and a social venture. It's important to also reflect on different traits, and maybe you're seeing this in your classrooms too. What we found, and around the world, for every 3 entrepreneurs, 2 were men and 1 was a woman. But when we get to social entrepreneurship, we saw a near parity that for almost every 1 woman, for a social entrepreneur, there was also 1 male social entrepreneur. And that was particularly pronounced in the US. So you can see when we look at Australia and the US in the last bars, 36% and 35% are starting or running a traditional business. But then this jumps to 48 and 51% for starting or running a social business. So that's a pretty exciting statistic that we're getting so many social entrepreneurs, and you're probably seeing them in your high schools. And just briefly about age, because that's also important. We're finding that social entrepreneurship is a young person's game. The GEM research only starts when you finish, so about age 18. But what we find is the prevalence rates of social entrepreneurship among nascent and established businesses are really higher for social ventures than they are for traditional ventures. So a lot more young people are considering this as a potential career path. And just to conclude on entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, so many of the lessons from economics, from personal finance, from traditional entrepreneurship also apply to social entrepreneurship. So the work that you're doing is really laying the foundation for so many in the future. So I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to talk with you tonight. Looking forward to some dialogue and your questions, and especially to learning from you, because it's been too long since I was in a high school economics classroom.
Well, thank you so much for that's just some fantastic information. Your background is inspiring, but some subjects that obviously our attendees here are very passionate about. We are going to open it up for questions, and everybody that's here with us tonight, think about something that you were inspired to ask Dr. Terjesen about, or that you want to share with her in your experience in similar topics. But we have some questions that were submitted prior to tonight. And I'd like to start with one of them from one of our attendees, Emily Schwartz. And her question is really related to the audience that we deal with as teachers. And the question is, what do you see as the greatest barrier for high school students looking to pursue entrepreneurship in their future?
Thank you, Emily. And I saw you were one of the first to log in tonight too. It's great to meet all of you, and you can just call me Siri. And boy, this is a really important question, because many people perceive those barriers. What we find around the world, and including in the US, is that a fear of failure is the greatest barrier for those. So if you think that failing could be, personally devastating, that's very difficult. I would also want to pop a myth, which is that a lot of people think it takes a lot of money to start a business. And of course, we see that. We see these big IPOs, we hear about venture capital, but many researchers have looked at this, and most Fortune 500 firms were actually started with less than $5,000. And we now have this wonderful network of organizations and other entities that we can use to start businesses, such that we don't have to raise all of that capital. I also think that's really important, the work you're doing. I deliberately showed that college tuition slide, because for me, it's personally really scary that so many young people take on so much debt without realizing the net present value of their decisions today. And you're helping them make good decisions. And if they decide to go to college, great. If they don't, that's okay too. But the point is, debt is a huge barrier to entrepreneurship. And that's true for college graduates, that's true for older folks. And so the more that we can get the importance of financial responsibility out there and making good decisions, the more we can prevent that from being a barrier too.
I think that is something that all of us would support, get that financial literacy and economic education out there. Thank you so much. One of our attendees, Michelle Benta Vega, has a question that she's going to pose to you.
Hi, thank you for being here today. Oh, I forgot what my question was, because I sent it a couple weeks ago. So here it is. How did being an elite athlete prepare you for work outside of sports?
Oh, thank you, Michelle. That's so sweet. I've reflected on this a lot, because it's nice to be good at something, right? And probably all of us are really good at something. And I think that there's that perseverance. So I've showed you that mailbox, because that really was what it was like for me, say, 28 years ago or so. And even now, and then I'm chasing after my children, sometimes it's hard to get up and go in the morning, but life is a lot of tournaments. And if we can persevere, we're just stronger on the other side of that. I also think that there's a lot of self-efficacy, and that's something we know about entrepreneurship. So if you know that if you feel that you have the knowledge and skills to start a business, and an entrepreneur, you're far more likely to start. And there's some self-efficacy in running too, that when you have some successes, you just feel a little bit better, and you'll feel that, at least you could finish that race. And then you can work on some other goals. And I think another final thing is just about finding the flow. It's so important to find something that you love, that it doesn't even feel like work. And I have to say, thinking back to those train rides and reading all the academic articles, even today I reviewed them, and it it didn't feel like work. It was just fun to see the data, to understand what the real findings were. And I think that's really important for all of us. And you're helping your students do that. And some of them will go on to be, entrepreneurial and economics geniuses. And others of them will just use those skills to pursue their other loves. But I'm so grateful to all of you.
Thank you. Is there somebody else that would like to pose a question? Feel free to unmute, introduce yourself, and give a minute there. Well, everybody's thinking. Another question that was posed is social entrepreneurship. If you can tell us again the definition that you use, and can you identify what you feel may be the most important, I don't know if that's a fair question, or the largest increase in social entrepreneurship areas, and then, in the next 5 to 10 years for the kids that we currently have in our classrooms?
Thank you. That's always a challenge in research. And some of you may be thinking about doing additional research as teachers, but we took a Big 10 approach to social entrepreneurship. So it includes any social, environmental, or community objectives. So that can be everything. That can be climate change, that can be social isolation, that can even include some religious entities. And that encompasses a whole range of activities. And actually, we're now seeing social entrepreneurship in all kinds of sectors. I just gave a talk in North Dakota last week on social entrepreneurship in the water industry, because we just have water shortages all over, and the government can't solve all of those problems and needs social entrepreneurs. And I think the exciting thing is that people are starting social ventures earlier. One of my favorite former students is Maria Rose Belding, and she got the idea for her social venture when she was 13 years old and working in a food pantry and realizing that there wasn't enough of some type of food on the shelves and too much of others. So she developed an app where hotels and restaurants and others could give their leftover food, put it up, and then other people could claim it. And that was able to create more of a market. For me, for social entrepreneurship, it's the ability for young people to follow those ideas. And I also think it's important, and you guys are much better at this. I know you're world class at this, right? You've got that balance between how can I motivate and teach a student, but how can I also provide real feedback so that they don't go off on these other paths, or bring them the right mentors. And I think that's a challenge too, because we want to be super supportive of these students, but we also need to give them feedback that will make them better and prepare them as entrepreneurs for a life of pivoting to what the business opportunities are and listening to customers.
Well, thank you so much. I know that Melissa Sanderson has a question in the chat. Do you want to share your question, Melissa, or would you like me to read it?
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'll ask it. Thank you so much for being here, Siri. You really are inspirational. I lived for 8 years in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And so my question is informed by that experience, because here in America and in many Western countries, professional sports is a huge element of economic activity. But in African countries, there's athletes who excel, and we watch them at the Olympics, etc. If they want to realize financial success with their skill set, they're pretty much forced to leave home. With your experience with global sports, do you think that there's any way to make sports more financially rewarding in places like Africa?
That's a great question. I've thought about that a lot, because at these world championships, believe it or not, ultra distance running is kind of equally distributed talent across race and ethnicity. So we had, at the time I ran, the top male runners were from Italy, but also from parts of Africa. And a few years before and a few years after, they were actually coming out of Japan. having traveled especially to Kenya, I've had actually a lot of Kenyan and Caribbean students in my classes who are also athletes. You know, my greatest hope is that those promising athletes, but also just extremely promising academic folks who are wherever they are in the world, can access good education. And I think, you know, that can be done through some online courses and so forth, but ultimately, you know, personally being at a university, I'd love to see them at a university where I think we can provide them with a world-class education at low or no cost, that can sort of accelerate them into the middle class, whether it's back in their home country or if they choose to stay here. There are, you know, models in other countries. So one of my dearest friends, Aaron, it's literally ARUN, one of those cases where when you have a name, that's maybe what you do as an occupation, but he grew up very poor in India, and he works in the civil sector for the government. And then he was on these government teams. And that's actually how it works in Italy and Kenya too. But that's, you know, not exactly a commercial sector. I also think it's important that we recognize that sports, you know, we're talking about very relative to your livelihood, a short span of time when those athletes can earn a lot of money. And there's some good data that shows that I don't remember the exact percentage, but a striking number of NFL players are actually bankrupt within 7 years of finishing the NFL. The MLB is actually better because they have this pension plan and everybody's forced to be on it, and then they issue it to you every year. So I have a neighbor who's ex-MLB, and he's, you know, he's thankful for that because through that he got to make good decisions. So I think it's important to think about what's next. I actually wrote an article about this a long time ago about how sports can teach us to be entrepreneurs. And I looked at examples of people like the great Ethiopian and Kenyan runners. Some of them stayed in America, but a lot of them went back and they started hotels and restaurants and other entities. There are many famous US athletes, not only from the well-paid sports like football and baseball, but even running. Dick Beardsley, who was one of the winners of the first London Marathon, he is now running a bed and breakfast in Minnesota. And there's lots of examples. So I think it's about making sure that they get good education. So for me, as a university professor, when we have those athletes, I know our coaches, and I always tell them that we are happy to have any athlete who's visiting come and tour the business school, and we'll talk to them and then stay in touch with them. And then also hopefully have them in our classes and afterwards. My favorite thing to tweet occasionally, you know, it's one of my former players will be recognized for his sporting prowess, like let's say by the next team. And I'll add a tweet. Well, you know, he's actually a really good student too. And he did an MBA along the way, because I think it's important, again, because you don't always have, you know, Tom Brady, we think about Tom Brady, but he's really the exception, right? Most people only are in the NFL for a couple of years and may or may not be equipped to make really good decisions for the rest of their life. Thank you, Melissa. It's a great question.
We have time for a few more. Is there anybody that would like to ask a question that you are thinking of this time? So one of the other questions that was presented, I just want to make sure anybody here can share their questions as well. One of the charts that you showed us actually was interesting to me, and it was the growth, I believe was the title, of social entrepreneurship in various countries. And I noticed that in Latin America and in some African nation, I believe it was, the growth was pretty large comparatively. And I was wondering, are people from those countries starting them, or others going into those countries and starting them? And so that's my personal question from your talk.
Thank you, Kathy. In fact, I think it's a little bit of both. So we have quite a lot of social entrepreneurs from more developed countries who are exporting those models, but then they're also inspiring or helping to set up those models. And there's still a debate in the literature about social entrepreneurship, whether it fills institutional voids or whether actually you don't need those voids, but you're just trying to make things better. And obviously there are just so many great stories. And what we do see in the developing countries, and that's in contrast with traditional and social entrepreneurship in the States, is that the majority of those people in the developing countries who are starting businesses have really high levels of education and income. Whereas in America, as you probably know, just look around your communities, you don't really need a college degree to start a business. Some people may not even have a proper high school degree to start a business. But when you look at a social venture where you're serving those community needs, then you frequently in the developing countries do have higher levels of education and income. And then I think another thing we could generally talk about is that it's great to have role models. So you're providing role models of this in your classroom, and then your students are maybe looking at Twitter and TV and seeing role models like Elon Musk portrayed, and realizing that entrepreneurship can have high social status and it's perceived as a good career. And again, that's a motivator to be an entrepreneur as well.
Thank you very much. In the last minute for Q&A, is there anybody that would like to share any final thoughts or ask any final questions? Okay, so there's a question about mentorship, and I know you said one of the initial questions we had was about barriers for high school students and that exposure to economic education and personal finance, and just great mentorship would be really critical for them. And what's some recommendations or advice or ways to make that happen, or industries that you think would be best for that type of mentorship? How do we make that mentorship really effective and in happening for students?
Thank you. That's such an important question. For mentors, our research shows us, and especially for women, I'm looking at so many on this call, women are able to have a mosaic of mentors. So just like I'm looking at all the titles of you, if I knew you personally, you were my high school teachers, I would think, oh, I really admired her this and his this and her this. And that's the great thing about your students, right? Is that they can be sponges too for different mentors. And of course, we're talking about role models and mentors. So role models are people they see, but maybe don't get a chance to interact with, but mentors, there's some interaction and feedback, which is really important, right? And I think it's important to have a variety of different industries, variety of people at different ages, different life experiences. And that's been something for me in teaching entrepreneurship to my classes that's been just so important, that there wasn't just one prototype, but that they could see something in everyone. And also that they could just get exposed to those different industries, because we tend to know best the industries that our parents or other family members are in, but we don't necessarily know what it could be like to be in these other industries. And then to find mentors who have that time, right? That aren't just signing up to say that they're doing it, but that they have a chance to really do deep dives with students. That's so essential. So I'm so excited that all of you are mentoring these students, but then, you just can't be the only one, and that you can introduce them to a lot of other folks.
I absolutely agree. And I was just putting in the chat that AC has a speakers bureau. Teachers, they may not be there as mentors entirely, but it might be a great resource to have speakers come into your classroom to expose kids to other industries, to ways that they maybe could be an entrepreneur, and just give some inspiration to students. And so if you're ever interested in that, let me know. But just such great information, Siri. And I'm going to turn things over to Teresa to wrap it up. But you did say you were going to be at our gala, right?
I'm so excited.
We're very excited to, and you're going to love our Arizona weather, although you're in Florida, so that's probably great too. But teachers, we will look forward to meeting Siri in person, and I look forward to seeing many of you then. And I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Teresa to conclude our program.
All right. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Siri, so much for joining us tonight. We're really looking forward to meeting you in person on November 2nd at our Champions in Education event. And for those of you that have not registered, we would love to see you all there at Scottsdale Resort at McCormick Ranch on November 2nd. Before we finish up today, I did want to share a few items that AC has coming up besides our event on November 2nd. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and I will let Kathy share a little as well. So I did want to let you all know, if you have not seen our website, this is what it looks like. And we do have some great teacher programs that we have been doing all fall and will continue in the spring. We did start up our Teach and Tour events again. So we just finished one at Ballet Arizona, and I see a few faces there that were there, and we had a fabulous morning, got to see the ballet rehearse. So it's a series that we started pre-pandemic and are happy to start again. So we do have a few Teach and Tours coming up this spring, so look for those. But I did want to mention, let me go back to our homepage here. We do have an event on November 13th, which is free of charge for all teachers. All teachers will receive a $75 stipend, as well as some great prizes that we are going to give away, including 2 tickets to a Coyotes game, which we're also going to give away another 2 in just a minute. But the event that we have on November 13th, it is a Saturday morning, and it is virtual. So if you're outside Maricopa County, we'd love to see you there. It's planning a financial future for yourself, your family, and your children. So providing you with some personal financial advice for yourself, but as well as some resources and things you can take back to your students. So we do have that event coming up on November 13th. So registration is open. If you go to our website and click right there, that is available. And then we have a great lineup for this spring, including our history and economics of the civil rights movement, as well as the economics of rescue during the Holocaust coming up this spring, in addition to our Teach and Tours that we have coming up. So I am going to let Kathy join in here and talk about any student programs that you wanted to mention.
Absolutely. Right now, I encourage all of you to consider registering for the Mayor's Challenge. So Mayor's Challenge has both economics and personal finance challenges for your students. And the first round of competition is an online round. It's free. It happens virtually at your school. So if students are learning personal finance or they are learning economics in grades 7 through 12, I absolutely encourage you to form teams of 3 to 4 students, register for them for this competition. That online testing round happens in the later part of November, but registration is open now. So if you're interested in learning more about that, email me. And then our other great event that several of you have done is our Financial Fitness in Action. So this is a personal finance simulation that we're doing them virtually right now, and hopefully in person. And we run your students through a budgeting simulation and bring in industry volunteers to help them create a monthly budget for a fictional career and a family. And so we've gotten great reviews on that. If you are interested in scheduling one of those for your students, act quickly. We're scheduling those for November and December now. So let me know if you want any more information on those.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. And you guys can always contact us. I hope you all know that. You have our emails. We would love to hear from you if you have any questions about our programs coming up. So before we do our grand prize drawing, I'm going to stop sharing really quick, and we are going to take a group photo. I know that you all love doing this. So if everybody could fix your hair, fix your glasses, turn on your camera, get fancy for a minute. And actually, because of the computer I'm using, I only need to do this once instead of twice. So let me get that ready to go. And I will count to 3. I'll give everybody a minute to turn their cameras on. Make sure everything is good, right? Okay. Dana, be careful if you are driving. Otherwise it makes me nervous. All right. 2 more seconds if you need to get ready. All right. So I am going to count to 3. On 3, smile, and I will take a screenshot on 1, 2, 3. All right. Now let me just snip that and make sure we are all good. All right. You are all absolutely beautiful. Let me go ahead and save that. And then I can get this out of the way so I can see all of you again. All right. Moving back to our presentation. Thank you all. It's lovely to see all of your faces. Let's go ahead and move with our prize drawing. So we have 3 prizes for tonight. And we are going to start with our first one. I have my handy dandy wheel here. First of all, I do want to mention that all K-12 current classroom teachers are eligible in this drawing. So let me go ahead and hide that list, but you should be up there if you are a K-12 teacher. And so our first drawing here, so I'm going to draw 3 for 3 different prizes. Our first one here is for a $50 Amazon gift card, which I know Christmas, right? And we're all trying to buy early because of supply chain issues. It's all economics, right? So $50 to spend on Amazon and hope that it gets here on time. So here we go. Here is for the $50 drawing. All right, Angie Rowe, congratulations. That was so close, Mr. Pondy. Angie Rowe, $50. So congratulations to Angie. Let's go ahead and take her off of there. The next drawing, and I should have shown you my fancy slide that I made, but I didn't. We have our 2 tickets to our Champions in Education event on November 2nd, and those are worth $175 each. So let's see who gets to join us on November 2nd. Dana Johnson. Don't clap while you're driving, but Dana Johnson is our winner for our CIE tickets. And our last prize, this is the big one, super big one. So we have 2 tickets to the Arizona Coyotes game on December 23rd against the Lightning. So ACU will provide you with 2 tickets. Oh, that's right. Dana's, should we do it? Should we do another one? I think Dana is already going as a guest. Okay, let's do it. Let's do another one then. Okay, so we'll do.
Let Dana go.
Take extras.
Oh, there we go. Okay, all good. That, I hope that's okay with everybody. We'll do that. All right. And so for the last one, it is 2 tickets to the Arizona Coyotes game on December 23rd against the Lightning. So ACE will provide you with 2 tickets to that game free of charge. So everybody ready? Can I get a round of like drum roll? It's a silent drum roll. I love that. Robin was doing jazz hands. Love it. All right. So here is our last prize drawing. Elma Perkins, who is coming to us from the Grand Canyon. Elma is a teacher there, I know very well. So Elma, congratulations on winning tickets to the Coyotes game. And let me go ahead and close this out. Keynote. The last thing, let me stop sharing all of this really quick. All right. I just want to thank all of you for joining us, and Siri, thank you so much for such a wonderful keynote address. And we're so excited to be able to meet you in person on November 2nd. And we're so happy that all of you are here with us this evening. So the last thing, as always, for those of you that are in my workshops normally, is an evaluation. I am going to put it in the chat box for you. There we go. And if you could all fill that out, because we want to make sure we are doing everything that we can for you. If you could so kindly fill that out, and if you have any questions, let us know, but we will stick around for a while to answer any questions you have. Other than that, have an absolutely fabulous evening. And we are so happy that all of you could join us tonight.